you be pretty with green eyes. And I heard I'm not pretty. I'm ugly because I have brown eyes. So for 11 years, was I 21? Yep. 11 years I carried that with me. You be pretty if you had green eyes.
Whether you've been married 1 or 20 plus years, at some point, you realized you were married into crazy.
And that's what our podcast is all about. We offer love, laughter, and a dose of reality as we unpack this crazy thing called marriage.
So sit back, relax, and get your ear hustle on. It's time to start the conversation.
All right, let's go.
Welcome to episode 54 of the Married Into Crazy podcast with Snooks and Lovey. I'm Lovey.
This is Snooks.
And, if you guys could have heard the back and forth prior to me hitting record right now. We were going back and forth about how we're going to start the podcast and who's right and who does what and da-da-da-da.
No, we didn't say who's right and who does what. He did try to lay hands on me like he was praying.
I was praying.
Like he had oil or something.
The demon, I was trying to get the demon
I was like,
out.
Jesus ain't even listening to you though.
Oh, I got a direct line. I got the main line.
You don't.
Sing the song.
He's
I got
like,
the main line.
oh, that's him. He don't ever pray.
I got like a bat phone directly to heaven.
Really? A bat phone?
Bat phone.
Anyway.
Yep. But one thing we want to thank everybody for actually tuning in to the Married Into Crazy podcast. It's been such a wonderful time sharing with all of you. And
I just want to do a new thing though.
What?
This year.
What's that?
Let's just start the podcast without you saying what episode it is.
Nope. Overruled.
Welcome to episode 54.
Really? Anyway, so
I'm just wondering if we. Okay.
Why does that bother you so much?
It doesn't bother me, but I was just like, you know what?
She can't count past 54. That's what's up.
Oh, okay.
No. Hey, so things happen, right? Sometimes there's some serendipitous or some pretty interesting things. We got this email today that I thought was pretty cool. We get this email from some random company. I know they were marketing to us specifically to buy something or to buy into their rating system. But we got a pretty cool email saying that it showed where we were trending on Apple Podcasts. And I thought it was pretty cool. It showed that we were moving up, which it's not so much about the ranking itself, other than the fact that people are listening. And I love the fact that you are all listening because everyone's taking an interest in developing their relationships and they find value in what we're talking about. I think that's pretty cool.
We're moving on up.
Really?
Nope. You're not going to sing with me?
All right, Mrs. Jefferson. She is on one today.
I had a great day today.
What was so great about it?
You know what? I woke up and I said, thank you, Jesus, for allowing me to be alive one more day. It's not like I got like fabulous sleep or what have you. I don't know. I just had a great day. I really did.
That's good. Well,
I wasn't even tired. I yawned maybe twice.
And that's an accomplishment.
That is an accomplishment.
Well, I think it's
Promise
cool
you.
because that's the way we should wake up, right? Every single day, looking forward to it. Not just waking up and taking whatever the day gives us, but just going out and really commanding the day, taking it. And so
I command you.
You were seriously
I'm
on something
sorry.
today.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right. You could be goofy. That's cool.
Wow, okay.
No, what I was just
Goofy,
saying
though?
that.
Goofy.
I was just saying that I thought it was pretty cool to get that email that showed that we were trending up from where we usually are at in the podcast world, if you will.
Where we've been.
And
I usually are.
And it just usually means that people are listening, and like I said earlier, and participating. And a lot of it is because the topics that we discuss, more times than not, comes from stuff that we receive via email. Or people that we know bring up topics or different topics that come up in conversation at work and with a variety of friends. So I think that's pretty cool. So one of the things that we're really going to ask is that each and every one of you go to wherever you're listening to the podcast, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, iHeartRadio, all these variety of different places that you're listening to us. Tune in. I mean, it goes on. We're in a variety of different places, but we're asking that you go there and you rate us. And also leave a review.
And that's something that I know that I need to do also, because I get caught up and I start listening to, like, there's some podcasts that I listen to. I'm like, oh, I'm going to write a review. And it may be 2 weeks later. I'm like, oh, man, I forgot.
Oh, man.
Swiper, no swiping.
But you're right. There's quite a few out there as well. And it's taken me time to go back and rate and review some of the podcasts, because I listen to a lot of different podcasts. And that's something that we all have in common, that in order to make ourselves that much more discoverable so people can have access, it really comes back to the number of reviews and ratings you receive. So we're not asking you to give us anything that you don't think we deserve, but we are asking that you have your voice heard. If you appreciate what's going on and the message we're bringing, some of the lessons and the stories and so forth, please go ahead and rate us wherever you're listening to us.
Just go and give us that 5.
Put
Out of
5 on
5.
it. Go ahead.
I got 5 on it.
See, I know you. I'm just going to start throwing out song titles and see if she sings it for the rest of the time.
Anyway.
But anyway, you said today that you had a great day.
I did. I had a fantastic day. I talked with a couple of the nurses. We got, started out probably the picture that we received of Zay.
Oh.
So,
We
you
got
know, our son, we got a picture of our son holding his son, our grandson. So he's up to 4 pounds.
Last time I heard it was 4 pounds.
4 pounds, 1 ounce.
Something like that.
Yeah. And his oxygen, he's on the lowest dose of oxygen where he's like almost ready to be removed. So continue prayers for Isaiah. We just thank everyone who reaches out and asks us how he's doing and just letting us know that they're praying for him and for our family. So we really appreciate that also.
Oh, yeah. Please keep making those prayer deposits in the prayer bank. We truly appreciate it.
Yeah.
And that's one of those banks that always gives back. Always.
That's right. Always.
So I also had a great day. So this morning, my day started out.
How great was it?
Wow. It was a great day.
Okay, sorry.
Started off extremely early, going through our extreme execution coaching certification program. Today was day 1 of 2, and we're looking forward to it. Sitting down with Dr. Eric Thomas and his son Jalen and some other colleagues, and just talking about ways to really help individuals really execute on their specific goals. And for our purposes, we're talking specifically about helping couples move forward with our couple-to-couple coaching. But it was really interesting. Some of the things that we discussed, the topics, really relate to not just couples, but some of the things I experienced last week in work. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember, this weekend I told you about a conversation I had with one of the doctors that I call on, that I was working with. And we had a conversation about the vanity of America. And I thought it was funny. Not funny, but not funny, haha, but just interesting funny. Peculiar funny. Because she was making a comment about how there have been contact lens companies in the past that have had a specific colored lens that had been discontinued. And some people freak out about how this lens is going to be gone. And oh my God, and people only know me with this particular color for my eyes. And what are they going to say? And what am I going to do? Because my entire career, I've had these color eyes and now I'm not going to be able to get them. And, it was really interesting. And at first, I thought it was all about vanity. Mm-hmm. And this particular physician goes, that's what she thought as well, until she realized there was something beyond the vanity. It was something that, it's like, she asked me specifically, people have these behaviors and these things, but do you ever stop to think about what was the motivator behind the behavior? What drove it? What happened to this individual to put so much stock in it? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of times we only see the outside, and we only see well, obviously you can only see what you see, but you don't know what the driving force was to make a person, appear, like you say, they appeared vain and they appear some kind of, oh, that she only wears this color or he only wore that color. But you don't know, like you said, what is driving that. What happened to them? What made them think about or made them feel like their eyes had to be this color, or who said something? And it's funny that, because we kind of a little bit talked, I had that same experience. I remember I was 10 years old and it was a Christmas, and my cousins and I, we were I don't know what we were doing, but we were all, the TV was going and we were just talking about different things. Or and my cousin turned around and he looked at me, and I don't know how, anyway, it didn't matter, but we started talking about like looks and how people dress and so on and so forth. And he told me, he goes, "You be pretty with green. You be pretty if you had green eyes."
Oh, I thought you said it was a lady at church or something that said that.
It was someone in my family.
Oh, wow. Okay.
"You'd be pretty if you had green eyes." And of course, what I heard was that I'm ugly because my eyes are not green. So that stuck with me for years. Now, mind you, I told you I was 10. I remember we were in, like I said, we were in the den where it was Christmas, and it just, "You'd be pretty if you had green eyes. You'd be pretty with green eyes." So not like, oh, they would enhance the way you look or they would what have you. "You be pretty with green eyes."
Not,
And I heard I'm not pretty. I'm ugly because I have brown eyes. So for 11 years, was I 21? Yep. 11 years I carried that with me. "You be pretty if you had green eyes." Now, I didn't know anything
how do you know
about.
it was 11 years? Why 11 years?
I was 10
I
when
know,
I was
but
21.
so what happened at 21?
I went and got contacts.
Oh,
I got green contacts.
okay.
So back then, I was like, do they even make, how could I ever have green eyes? Would I have to have a eye replacement? Whatever, as a child, you think of these different things. So when I discovered colored contacts, I went and I got green contact lenses, and I was beautiful with
Well,
my
you were
green
beautiful
contact
before.
lenses. Well, not to me, because I remember I heard you would be pretty with green eyes. So a lot of times, and I wore them all the time. I mean, all the time. And at that time, they were, what is it, extended wear? You could sleep in them or whatever.
Probably weren't supposed to, but okay.
But yeah, I wore them for years. I wore them, and so
That's
sad.
no. It's not sad.
That is
Yeah, well, it
sad.
is sad. I mean, that story, but I was going to say it's not sad. Unfortunately, that's common in so many different ways. What's below the surface of the actions that we see every single day? Do we ever take the time to really figure out what the motivators are behind specific behaviors? I'll give you a case in point today. When you and I were talking, and you were asking me questions about, oh, how did the training go with ET and Jalen, and I was starting to tell you exactly how it went, and I thought it was really cool, and we talked about this, we talked about that, and you started asking me a ton of questions. I was getting like this barrage of questions, and I got a little upset, and I think you could tell because I got a little short with you. Like, I don't know, I didn't ask that. Oh, I didn't ask that. And you asked me another question. I'm like, well, I don't know, I didn't ask that question, and then I was frustrated. And then you got off the phone with me, but it took me a while. I didn't think about the motivation behind it. I felt like I was getting, like I said, a barrage of questions.
Interrogated.
Yeah, like I was being interrogated. But then I forgot to remember, or take the time to remember, that when we look at our DISC assessment, and you're very high when it comes to the C, where it's one of those individuals where you're very process oriented and you're very meticulous and you like to know all the pieces, everything has a place. And there's a place for everything. And you had all these questions. And with me being a very high D or not, I was like, I don't know. I'm a big picture guy. I just asked what I needed to know. I didn't ask all these peripheral questions that are probably good questions, but wasn't important to me in the moment. So I got frustrated with you. And I didn't think about it from the standpoint of, this is your perspective. And then telling myself to slow down and answer your questions as best I could.
Yes, everyone in podcast land, Love you was being mean to me today.
No, but it wasn't that. But you know what it is? It's like the tip of the iceberg. If you think of an iceberg, and there's a lot of different pictures out there and different memes regarding motivation and achievement and so forth. But if you truly look at a picture of a real iceberg, if you're able to take like a 3-dimensional view of it, and there's a lot of them out there. If you just Google it right now, photo of an iceberg, what you're going to find is that the tip of the iceberg is all we really see above the surface. And when you see that surface or you see that iceberg, you think, oh, look at the iceberg. But all you're really seeing is strictly the tip. Beneath the iceberg is anywhere from 50 to 75% of that full iceberg is beneath the water, which is beneath the surface. And if you take that visual of what we see as just the tip of the iceberg, it's the same thing with each and every person that we deal with, even in our relationships. Every spouse, every boyfriend, girlfriend, every coworker, every child you coach, every person you come across, what we see is nothing more than the tip of the iceberg, because what we see is a manifestation of everything that's beneath the surface. And I think that's important to talk about, because in a relationship, when people have arguments, when you and I have difficulties, like a lot of stuff that you and I dealt with in the very beginning, and even to this day, we carry so much luggage, so much baggage because of the things that happened to us in our youth. I had a conversation with CB today. He's one of the brothers out of the Bay Area who's also going through this training with me. And CB and I were talking about our different experiences as growing up. And I pointed out to him, it's funny that when I was growing up, I had a difficult time in some areas because the area I grew up in, my neighborhood, wasn't considered one of the best areas. And so my family and I came from one particular area, but then my mom broke her back, who, by the way, tomorrow would be her birthday. Mm-hmm. God bless her. She's going to have a heavenly birthday tomorrow. But she broke her back to ensure that I went to private school. So I went to school with some people that looked at me and thought, oh, well, he doesn't belong here because he goes to this particular neighborhood. But then I based on my education, I would go back into my neighborhood and I would talk a certain way. And then people would say, oh, well, you talk funny, or you talk like them, or to be perfectly blunt, they would say, oh, you talk like you're white, or, because I would enunciate or whatever.
I'm sorry, I pronounce all my letters.
But what I would end up doing was changing the way I talk so I would fit in. Mm-hmm. And then for me, sports ended up becoming, a great outlet. I ended up becoming really good at sports, but that was my outlet. I was pushing through that so I could actually fit in. But because of that, I grew up with a complex of never really ever truly feeling like I fit in. And so beneath the surface of being articulate and, whatever, in corporate America, I can operate by corporate. But if I'm back in my neighborhood, I can operate in that way. So now it's become a strength because I can function in a couple of different worlds. But for a very, 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 very long period, I felt like I didn't even belong anywhere. So I don't know. What are your thoughts?
No, I relate to that because I remember growing up in Concord, in Walnut Creek area, and we were like there were like 7 black families out there, and trying to find where you fit. And coming from Sacramento, where
it's pretty integrated,
very, and then going to live out in the Bay, the East Bay anyway. Like I said, it was we were one of 7 black families that were out there, so it wasn't necessarily that I felt like I fit in. I hated it when we first moved out there, and I kind of felt like I had to. That was
7 families. That's a specific number.
Well, seriously, it was like 7 black families, and we knew them all. I mean,
right?
You saw the nod.
This 30 plus years ago. I hear you.
Yeah, but I mean that was just. It could have been more, but who we saw, who went to school, you can count the number of kids that went to the schools and what have you. So always trying to find where you fit in. I wasn't necessarily one to change who I was or my demeanor too much, because we all knew we had to kind of band together during that time, because it was kind of us against them. It was a lot of racism. It was a lot of, prejudice. And so we kind of had to band together. We had some fun times and everything, but still, as far as like fitting in, and I knew I didn't fit in. I was okay with that. I wasn't trying to, not for.
See, and I think it's those experiences that kind of lay the groundwork. That's the stuff beneath the surface, right, of the iceberg.
Well, see, and then there's that. So it kind of it shaped me a lot because now I know how to not, and I'm not saying that there are people who do not, but some people that live or they've never really left their neighborhood, they don't know how to really integrate with other races. I know how to do that because of what was beneath the surface, if that makes sense. Well, this underneath the water, or whatever. You saw a little bit of. You didn't get to see all of. You well, how do I say this? Not that you didn't get to see all of me, but you only see a portion, and of course you don't know what makes up that tip.
You were good at projecting what was needed to be seen in the moment. Well, see, because what I'm talking about is who we are is that tip, or I won't say who we are. We're the entire iceberg. The great majority of who we are is what's underneath the surface, and even if it's subconscious, but it's one of those things that it's there. But what people see just on the street when they're looking at us, or they see our behaviors at work, or even in our relationships, spouse to spouse, is we see that just the tip of the iceberg. And I guess the challenge is, what I'm trying to relay is that we have to go beyond what we see on the tip of the iceberg and really take a moment to pause and ask each other or ask ourselves, what's the driving motivation behind what's going on? Like when we get into an argument.
Well, a lot of times, I don't mean to cut you off, but a lot of times, people think that all you are is the tip.
Right.
They never think that there's any substance to anything below. I won't say never, but a lot of times they don't think about what's below.
Well, think about popular sayings. What you see is what you get. I wear my emotions on my sleeve. We have these sayings, and which is basically saying that I'm being transparent.
Yeah. That's the word we like to use. I say that all the time. Being fully transparent.
Well, but those are the catchphrases, right? So those catchphrases actually trap us into believing that what you see is what you get, but what you see could be an illusion.
But what you see, okay, like when I say being fully transparent, I am being fully transparent on this issue. What you see is what you get on this issue. That doesn't mean that what you always, I'm just walking around and I'm like you said, my emotions are on my sleeve. I've been known. I won't say known. I've been accused of my emotions are all on my face. I can't. If I'm upset, everybody knows I'm upset because I look like I'm upset because I wear my emotions on my sleeve, on my face, wherever. So what you see is what you get.
Sing that song. It's written all over your face.
I'm not.
No, but you're
I
absolutely.
thought you wanted me to sing what you see is what you get. Is that the Temptations?
Okay, I'll take that.
I'm sorry.
But it's
being silly.
But no, I get what you're saying. You are being fully transparent in the moment. But I think that a lot of things we say, these catchphrases, these contemporary sayings, kind of creates a herd mentality where like this is just what it is. But we get trapped into it because you see somebody having a difficult day. Like for instance, okay, you're working customer service. You're at the window. Somebody comes up to you to talk to you, and they're having a horrible day, and they're angry and what have you. And then maybe they say something rude or whatever to you, and they're in a rush, and they walk off, and they think, oh, that person's a jerk. But you never know. I mean, maybe that person just got fired from their job, or they got laid off because of a situation. And not saying that they're in the right, but there's a variety of things that happen. Like the person I'll never forget, and I brought it up in one of the earlier podcasts. There was a book by Mitch Albom, The 7 People You Meet in Heaven. Mm-hmm. And in The 7 People You Meet in Heaven, it was talking about how all these different things take place. And one of the examples that he used in the book was this person's racing through traffic and cutting people off or what have you. And on the periphery, this one person's in the car, and they're looking in the review, and they're thinking, oh, this jerk is just trying to race and get through traffic. And so I'm not going to let him pass. And then they're being a real jerk themselves because they're not letting the person pass rather than seek safety and move to the side. But when later on down the road, when everybody's in heaven and it's one of the 7 people, you're up there and the guy's like, "Oh, I don't know you. I've never met you." Well, actually, you did, because I was in traffic one day and you didn't know it was me, but I was racing through traffic because my little girl was choking and I had to get her to the hospital. You don't know what's going on in the place, but on the surface, what you see isn't necessarily the truth.
Right. Well, it's the truth for that moment in that space for the person who's receiving the information. You're only going to get what I allow you to see. Does that make sense?
Keep going.
So at that moment, the one who lost the job or went to the customer service window, at that moment, they probably were being a jerk. And so the lady at the window, she's like, "Oh, this dude, oh, he's being a jerk," or whatever. He goes on about his business. So she saw the jerk coming out. He was being a jerk because he was having a bad day. He was experiencing whatever. So that doesn't mean that those emotions or what he showed was not real. That just means that it doesn't mean that it's always like that. We tend to think that someone who's being a jerk this one day, we associate them with jerkiness forever. So the next time we see him, we be like, "Oh, this one,
Oh, he's a jerk.
he's a doozy," because
To infinity and
last
beyond.
time he came in here, he was
Right.
blah blah blah. So as the guy is waiting in line and you're hoping he goes to another window, but you see that you're actually gonna get him. In your mind, you're all like, "Oh, I'm ready for him. I'm such and such or whatever." And then he comes up and you're expecting jerkiness, and he's just as pleasant as can be.
Okay.
Because something in his life changed. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
It wasn't the way that it was. Whatever the issue was, it corrected itself. It righted itself. So now he's not in the jerky mood. But now you're in a jerky mood because you're anticipating him being a jerk. So you're just like, "Well, I'm going to just be, because you're not going to talk to me that way."
You're putting up a barrier before that person ever shows up. Or you see them coming.
Well,
so
you see him
you put up your
coming.
defenses.
And so what you saw, that tip, that doesn't mean that the tip's not real.
Okay.
Those actions did happen. He did act a certain kind of way. And so now you're responding to you're acting to his actions. And you're expecting it the next time you see him to be that way because now you associated him to be like that.
Okay, and that's good. So let me throw you a curveball. So with all that said, we were talking about kind of a happenstance type thing, right? This is a person that just shows up. Now let's relate that to relationships. So now we're in a relationship. We're married 1, 2, 3, 10, 15 years. And some people say that, we always butt heads, or we never come to an agreement, or do we take time in our relationships with the people that we've just in a relationship with, or people we've been in long-term relationships with, and stop to really have a conversation about why we do the things that we do? Why do we always butt heads? Is there something that I'm doing? Or is there something that the conversation, or is there something that happened in your past, even in your youth, that may be causing you to be reluctant to hear what I'm saying, or to put up a wall when this particular thing happens, or to approach certain things or a certain person a certain way? Do we ever stop to really think about that?
If we're doing like Stephen Covey said, seek first to understand and then to be understood, right? Isn't that what he said?
Yeah. She's like,
You're
wait, did I
looking
get
at
that
me
right?
like I'm crazy. Like, did I say it wrong?
Keep going.
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, obviously, yes and no. For some, it comes down. It's always going to come back to how we communicate. Am I going to just get mad because you're mad, or I'm going to try to find out what the heck is wrong with you? Why are you acting like this? Why are you? Or am I going to, you say something and I'm going to say it back, or
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. Because in order to have that conversation, and to be able to get to what the problem may be, to even be able to identify what's beneath the surface, as far as the rest of the iceberg. We're talking about the tip, but then now I'm saying, well, do we ever make an attempt to see or understand what's beneath the surface? But it's kind of hard to do if I myself don't even recognize or acknowledge that there's something under the surface as well.
Mm-hmm.
We have to recognize within ourselves that there was an issue, there was an occurrence, there was something that transpired that made me the way that I am in this particular niche or scenario or situation.
Well, because just like kind of you said a little bit earlier, in regards to relationships, someone we all know someone who is like, oh, how is such a she be tripping all the time, or he get on my nerve all the time. He always, or she's always, and that's why and we don't even. So in those situations, it's like no one is, no one wants to be the first one to say, let's have a conversation and really talk. Let's really pull back the layer. Let's stick our head under the surface to see how big this iceberg is. That this, are we going to be able to chisel it down? What are we going to do? Because this tip that I see grew from somewhere.
Right.
So where did it come from? And how do we address it? How do we, move forward? How do we get around it? Because it's just the tip. I'm only showing you the little tiny bit. Like you said, we all know that. Look at what happened with the Titanic. Little tiny, well, I won't say little tiny, but the amount of ice that was sticking out, they thought they could get around it, but what was underneath destroyed it. So a lot of times,
Ooh, that's deep. Did you catch that? I don't want to glean over that. What we saw was something small above the water, but in an attempt to get around it, what was beneath the water destroyed the Titanic. And the same thing can destroy a relationship.
you just really taking over.
No, I'm just like, go on. No, I'm like, you deep. You go on. I'm your hype man right now.
You're making me laugh. Stop.
Go on, runner.
No, but you know what I'm saying? A lot of times we see issues, we see certain things, and we just kind of well, let's try to get around it. We don't ever really address, like when they saw the iceberg. I'll use the Titanic again. When they saw the iceberg, well, it was dark, but I'm just saying, you see the iceberg up ahead, you're like, oh, okay. Let's see, we could probably maneuver around it. No one's really addressing, but in maneuvering, we destroy so many things because we never address it. So,
no, I think that's you're perfectly right in that, and that was really good. And I hope people reflect on that in the attempt to actually get around what they see in the iceberg, depending upon what's beneath the surface, you may try and maneuver around it, but it could end up ultimately destroying.
Yeah, because sometimes you can't get around it. You either we're going to tackle it head on, or it's just going to be.
But then that's a challenge because, okay, so let's say you're looking at me and you see the iceberg and you recognize that something is beneath the surface that needs to be dealt with. Mm-hmm. But if you see that and if you're looking for it, how do you get, if the person that has the iceberg themselves, the person that has the issues that need to be addressed and acknowledged, what if they're not willing to acknowledge it, or they refuse to, like, no, I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me.
Okay, well then that's when you make a decision. Do I an incision? Did I say that?
You said decision.
Oh, okay. That's when you make a decision. Do I abandon ship, or are we just all gonna go down? And I'm not one for abandoning ship, but you can't continue on in a relationship that is all one sided, because it's not a relationship at that point. It's just you trying to hold on to something that's not gonna really get any better, because it does take two people.
It does.
I say it won't get any better. It may get better because you may just decide that you're okay with things the way they are, and so you stagnate your own self just so that you don't go without. But nothing ever improves as far as like what you really, really want, you just kind of settle. Well, at least I have this, or at least she's here, or at least he's there. But
But the problems keep
the
resurfacing.
problems will always resurface. But it's not, are they really problems then? If you're cool with it, is it a problem?
Yeah, true. It's that rusty nail syndrome. So, what are three things that you would recommend, or that we should recommend, that people do to kind of get beyond just looking at the tip of the iceberg, but really starting to address or to acknowledge, see, assess what's beneath the surface?
Well, the first part, you have to communicate. You have to, if you see something, I don't want to be like, oh, you saw, oh, I saw you do, got better.
What?
Like if you see, I just said if you see something, but as soon as you don't, as soon as you see, oh, I saw you do this, so that means there's an iceberg.
Oh, right. Don't make a mountain out of a molehill.
Oh yeah, don't make.
I was like, what are you talking about?
I was doing my pirate.
No, but I think you're right. Communication is key. But it's hard to communicate something that you don't understand or that you don't even know exists. I was going to say that one of the main things that needs to take place is to do an assessment. You have to self-assess. You have to be able to have some awareness that something is there. You can't communicate with another person if you don't really know who you are.
Right, but if I think I know who I am, that's like, oh, we should do an. I mean, unless you go into it like, let's do an assessment, or let's. How do you get someone to self-assess when they don't think that there's anything wrong? Why do I need to self-assess? I'm right. I know I'm this. I've been doing this for however long.
And how's that working out for you? And that's the case. I mean, somebody. Look, the bottom line is it has to be somebody that's willing to self-assess. And if you are willing to self-assess, then I highly recommend that you get involved with one of these types of assessments. There's a DISC assessment that's out there. There's a variety of, there's the Myers-Briggs, there's all these personality index type things. There's so many different things that you can do to try to understand yourself. And that's biblical. It says, to know thyself before, and I'm going to screw up the scripture yet again. I'm so good at screwing up scriptures.
Because you don't go to church. No, I'm playing.
But it's one of those things where you need to know yourself before you contribute to a part. And the bottom line is you should try and get a really good, and this is for all you out there that are single, that are
Study to
engaged.
show thyself approved.
You should actually end up knowing yourself. But in order to become before you can come together with another person and become a couple, and seek to, if you will, pardon the phrase, but to complete someone else, you can't complete someone else or come together to create a whole if you don't even know who you are. And one way to do that is actually through doing an assessment. You're holding your breath like you want to say something.
Well, no, I'm just gonna say, it's always you can't be a whole if you're not a whole already. Isn't that some math equation? Like a whole is always a whole, or okay, I'm not good at math, but what I'm saying is that in order to be whole, you should already be complete too.
With another individual, correct. So in order to be
complete, you have to be complete first.
Yeah, you
Not
just said that.
okay.
And I agreed with that.
Okay, I just want to make sure because I don't think I'm saying it correctly.
No, you're talking about donut holes. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, you know what I mean.
But no, you're absolutely. So in order to do that, what we are going to recommend is that if not us, then somebody else. But there's assessments that you can take to truly understand yourself before you can communicate with other individuals. The way and be extremely effective at communicating with your spouse or communicating even with coworkers or with other individuals, you need to know who you are. And the first step in doing that is doing a self-assessment. And of course, you can actually do that in a variety of different ways. But as a couple, we're going to invite you to participate in our couple-to-couple coaching that's done. And you can actually find that on the Married Into Crazy podcast. We talk about it, but you can find it at marriedintocrazy.com at our website. And there's different assessments that can be done usually, but going forward, we're going to be offering an opportunity for couples to be able to know themselves. We're going to be able to provide them with assessments so they can actually get a better idea of who they are. And then, if need be, depending upon everybody's situation is a little different, but depending upon your particular situation, we can actually then assist you if you want to go further to get deeper and deeper into your communication and understanding yourself and the perspective from where other people are coming from. But these are the types of things that people need to do in order to ensure they have longevity, that they're able to move forward and have ongoing communication. But I think a lot of it comes down to, as always, like we said before, communication. We're going to keep coming back to it. But the easiest way to ensure you have proper and good and continuing communication is to know the language you should be speaking.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
You've got to understand what language the person you're talking to understands so you can speak their language and vice versa. And so, it was a lot that we kind of threw into this particular podcast. But I think the biggest thing was, understand that when you see the tip of the iceberg, that there's so much beneath the surface.
Right. And you can't always maneuver around it.
Right. You got to take it on head on. So with that, what we want to do is go 2 for the road.
That's my favorite part.
It's just to make all that noise. I guess it's a lot louder here than it comes through on the podcast.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. So now we're going to pull. So she's going to pull.
Did I pull first last time? Or
I think you did. Doesn't matter. Go ahead. You pull. What does it say? If it says something about shopping, I'm going to be so irritated.
No, I can do the laundry.
Oh, okay. Because you don't do that now.
Oh, I just did it yesterday.
You do it all the time. She won't even let me. They won't even let me do the laundry, y'all.
No, he's banned. Lovey shrank and faded outfit. So
okay. So
this is early in the marriage, but still,
I do laundry.
Some of the
this is
detergent
funny.
didn't.
This is so funny. So the card I got says, I can send flowers just because. And this is funny because earlier today, I received a text from our 19-year-old daughter just out of the blue that basically said, it's okay if you send flowers just because. Aww. And she wasn't talking about sending to her mom. She wanted flowers.
Hilarious. You can send us flowers, didn't she say that?
Yes. Yeah. She said you can send us flowers. She had to include herself.
Well, good for her. That's right.
Excuse me. So I guess I have to send flowers. So those 2 for the road.
And I will let you all know if we all got flowers.
And I will let y'all know if I don't have clean drawers to wear because she didn't do the laundry.
Well, we should have did this yesterday because I did laundry yesterday.
She did. So I'm good for the week, y'all.
Oh, for the week? Wow.
Anyway, we thank each and every one of you for listening and joining us on this podcast. We love each and every one of you and all the input you're giving to the Married into Crazy podcast. And again, thank you for listening because without you, there is no us.
And don't forget to, if you feel so inclined, to go ahead and give us a rating on one of the
podcast venues that you
use, and we'd appreciate it.
And keep the ideas coming. We've got some really interesting topics coming up, and all these interesting new topics are coming directly from you, the listeners. And I'm excited to get into some of these topics. Some of them are really fun and interesting, and others are really deep. So until the next time, be blessed.
Bye-bye.